They want to put me in prison, just so you understand. They tell me I should be nice. They want to put me in prison. It's never happened before in the history of our country. I did nothing wrong. I have crooked judges. I have crooked prosecutors. And they're all Democrats.
Donald Trump appeared to have prison on his mind yesterday as he talked to reporters at his New Jersey golf club. And the juxtaposition of electoral politics and criminal court is not ideal for him. Not only is Trump awaiting sentencing on his conviction in New York on 34 felony counts set to happen in a matter of weeks, but special counsel Jack Smith's federal criminal case against Trump for his attempt to overturn the 2020 election is back in the hands of D.C. Judge Tanya Chutkan, and it will be back in the headlines starting in September. And while there is no chance that Trump will be tried in Washington, D.C. before November, there is a very real possibility that there could be action in Judge Chutkan's courtroom between now and Election Day. In a new piece today in New York Magazine, former federal prosecutor Elie Honig writes, if you've been hoping that Trump faces accountability for trying to steal the 2020 election before voters head to the polls for the next one, don't despair. Not fully, anyway. Judge Chutkan still can, and I believe will, order an evidentiary hearing to enable Smith to air some of his most explosive evidence before voters head to the polls. If that happens, brace for a series of dramatic in-court encounters. Joining me now is the great Andrew Weissmann, former FBI general counsel and co-host of the indispensable MSNBC podcast, Prosecuting Donald Trump. Andrew, it has been far too long since I have spoken with you, and I'm eager to get your thoughts. I know you had an op-ed this summer suggesting much the same as Elie Honig's piece in the New York Magazine today, which is that these evidentiary hearings could be a real thing this fall. Can you talk a little bit about your level of bullishness that they're going to happen? And is there anything that would serve as a model for something like this?
Sure. Great questions. And yes, it's really nice to be back talking with you. So I think that the big pictures for people who want to see accountability in terms of a trial, this is a federal case. And so if Donald Trump is elected, this case will go away because he will just tell his Department of Justice to get rid of it. And so this case will be dismissed, as will the Florida case, to the extent that that is still kicking around because the government has appealed the dismissal in that case. Those will all go away if Donald Trump is elected. So the only chance of these cases actually having full-blown trials, not just sort of this mini trial, is if Kamala Harris were to be elected. Between now and the election in the D.C. case, you can be sure that Donald Trump is going to be fighting like crazy to do what he's done very, very well, which is to delay everything. And really, I think, a real black mark on sort of our system of justice and being able to hold people account. The New York State Court looks, frankly, so much better than the federal courts in that. But starting on September 5th, we will have a status conference before Judge Chutkan, where she will decide whether there is this so-called mini trial, where she has been told by the Supreme Court on certain of the issues in the case to have a hearing to sort of flesh out factually what is really been charged and whether this is official conduct that the former president engaged in which case it could be immune from prosecution, or whether it is conduct he took as a candidate running for office, so that you could be the president but taking actions as a candidate. And I think the model for this, to answer your last question, is Georgia. Georgia had essentially a sort of mini trial in connection, if you remember, with Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, trying to remove his case from state court to federal court, and he testified at that sort of mini trial, that hearing. And so I think that's the closest model to what Judge Chutkan could do. And I agree with Elie that if there is that hearing, which, again, Donald Trump will be fighting like crazy to not have it go forward, if that were to go forward, we will likely get new evidence that we're not aware of from the January 6th hearings.
Do you think, I mean, it feels like the biggest sort of dispute or the biggest questions that Judge Chutkan has to resolve probably surround Trump's conversations with state electors, state election officials relating to his fake electors plot, and the comments he made on the ellipse. Just to talk about the first one, you know, if that is something she has an evidentiary hearing on, Judge Chutkan, whom would you expect to be brought in to testify on something like this? And so many of the conversations he has in the Oval Office with administration officials are now off limits.
Yeah, so I think that you would have sort of two sides to that. You would have people at the state side, the sort of Brad Raffensperger, and the people who actually made the recording, to talk about what was said, to give some color to the context in which those conversations occurred. And you could also have people from within the White House. And again, remember, just because they're in the White House doesn't mean that all of their testimony will be something that can't be heard, especially if you can show that in the White House they were acting on behalf of candidate Trump. And obviously is a very good argument for that, because, you know, if you're saying find me a certain number of votes, that's not something he was doing, you know, as president. That was something he wanted because he wanted to, as a candidate, to win. And so I do think that you could end up with very interesting testimony from both sides of that telephone call. And it's worth just noting that while we do know a lot from the January 6th committee hearings, remember, there are a lot of people who within the White House who were called to testify who claimed privileges and didn't testify about direct conversations with the former president. And as well, Mike Pence, by all accounts, he obviously didn't testify in the January 6th committee hearings, but he has been in the grand jury in the D.C. case. So those are all ways in which we could be getting new information at a time that is obviously quite explosive in terms of the election that's coming up.
Well, that's a great point. So do you think that there's any concern around the sort of the policy, the 60-day rule that, you know, the DOJ doesn't take any prosecutorial steps that could influence an election? I mean, is there a case to be made that we know that Vice President Harris is sort of discouraging people when they start chanting lock him up at her rallies? She doesn't want to be seen as being involved in this in any way. I mean, how much sensitivity do you think there is in terms of the timing?
So, by the way, I think Kamala Harris is being incredibly careful because, remember, she is the sitting vice president, and she, like President Biden, have a view which is that for pending criminal matters, that is something that is left to the Department of Justice, and they don't want to weigh in. That is in distinct contrast to former President Trump's view of the relationship of the president to the White House, and one that he exemplified when he was in office. I do think that it will be raised by Donald Trump, that there shouldn't be these kinds of things happening before the election. But I don't think, as somebody who's been at the Department of Justice for over 20 years, it does not raise a concern about the so-called 60-day or 90-day rule, because that is about not making a covert case overt during that period of time. Here, this is an indicted case. And so I don't think that policy applies. But I do think we're running out of time in the sense that Judge Chutkan just may not be able to schedule this given the briefing and the issues, the legal issues that are going to be thrown her way. Because to say that there will be sand thrown in the gears by Donald Trump's legal team is an understatement. It was more like boulders will be thrown in her way to slow this down.
An entire beach imported from Mar-a-Lago. Andrew Weissmann, it is a pleasure to see you. Thank you for your brilliance and expertise on this. I appreciate you spending a little Friday with me.
But we begin in North Carolina, where earlier today, Vice President Kamala Harris unveiled her plans to tackle one of the top issues for voters this election cycle, the cost of living. Harris pitched a handful of comprehensive new policies focused on lowering costs for American families, including a ban on price gouging for food and groceries, an expanded child tax credit, tax cuts for regular income earners as opposed to the rich, a $25,000 subsidy for first-time home buyers, and a cap on prescription drug costs. The VP spoke about the progress the economy has made since the COVID pandemic, which started 4 years ago and devastated the economy, causing inflation to spike. And she emphasized that while inflation has cooled, there's still work to do.
Still, we know that many Americans don't yet feel that progress in their daily lives. Costs are still too high. And on a deeper level, for too many people, no matter how much they work, it feels so hard to just be able to get ahead. As president, I will be laser focused on creating opportunities for the middle class that advance their economic security, stability, and dignity. Together, we will build what I call an opportunity economy.
Harris also drew a direct contrast between her plan and Donald Trump's plan, or lack thereof, calling out the speech he delivered in the same state earlier this week.
2 days ago, Donald Trump was here in North Carolina. He said he was going to talk about the economy. I think you all watched. You know what I'm about to say. But he offered no serious plans to reduce costs for middle-class families. No plan to expand access to housing or health care. And that, actually, I think for most of us, was not surprising. Because we already know his plans. We know the Project 2025 agenda.
It comes after Trump's, quote, news conference at his multi-million-dollar Bedminster Golf Club yesterday, where the initiation fees are even higher than the $200,000 cost to join Mar-a-Lago. Town & Country magazine estimates the fees are up to $350,000. And during those remarks, he rambled on about bird cemeteries and Time magazine with zero policy proposals while being surrounded by groceries some poor low-level aide probably set up and that Trump probably had never seen before in his whole entire pampered life, and that were sitting out in the hot summer sun for over an hour. But while Trump is flailing, Vice President Harris, who has been a presidential candidate for a little less than a month, is overseeing a pretty picture-perfect campaign. It is actually hard to overestimate just how well-run her campaign has been. From their communications team and witty, rapid response statements that tear into Donald Trump and J.D. Vance by not going too low, but rather just low enough to throw hilarious shade, to their social media team's ability to connect with Gen Z and embrace the memes while always being very demure, very mindful. Not to mention the record-shattering amount of money they've pulled in, hundreds of millions of dollars, which they are spending in the right way. The campaign launched a $90 million advertising effort in swing states just for this month, even running ads on Fox during the daytime and spending 10 times as much as Trump on digital advertising, while also running a strong ground game, opening hundreds of field offices in every winnable state because ads are great, but field is what wins elections. Starting today, the Harris-Walz campaign is kicking off a weekend of action, which will include more than 2,800 grassroots events in battleground states. Things like Callin' for Kamala, phone banks, Hound Lovers for Harris meetups at dog parks, and organizing booths at cultural events like Wisconsin's Africa Fest. And on Sunday, Harris-Walz and their spouses will also be taking part in a bus tour across the crucial state of Pennsylvania. But even so, it is important to remember that you can have the best-run campaign in the world, and none of it would matter if you don't have a great candidate. But that is exactly what the Democrats found with Kamala Harris. The energy and the momentum that she's been able to generate prove that she was built for this moment. And the contrast between her and Trump could not be more stark. And she doubled that by doing something kind of revolutionary, just picking a running mate she vibes with, while Trump and Vance are rarely even seen together. All of this is highlighted in a new video of Harris and Walz, where the two are just having a sit-down conversation about their lives, food, and music, as well as the issues. Kind of like a TV talk show, Kamala and the Coach. Catch it on Peacock or Hulu or Netflix. Proving again that unlike the golden toilets washed-up TV star and the hedge fund Yaley woman hater, The Democratic candidates are normal, relatable, and just downright fun and joyful people.
Like I have white guy tacos and
What is
like
that?
black,
Like mayonnaise and tuna? What are you doing?
pretty much ground beef and cheese.
That's
and,
okay. Do you put any flavor in it?
No.
Oh.
Here's the deal.
I called
was hoping
you,
maybe
Tim.
we wouldn't have to.
I called you, Tim.
Yes,
You didn't answer, Tim.
I know.
What happened?
The most important call of my life. It popped up, and we didn't recognize the caller ID, and it went to voicemail.
Joining me now is Alicia Johnson, senior advisor to the 2020 Biden-Harris campaign, and Rick Wilson, co-founder of the Lincoln Project and former Republican strategist. I cannot not go to Rick. I'm so sorry. Normally I would do ladies first, but Rick, this calls to you. I mean, look, this is how the Republicans, okay, your former team, because look, you used to run some pretty bomb ads. You're really good at this. I know you're good at campaigning. This is how conservatives are reacting to Harris and Waltz talking about food and white guy tacos.
Right.
Mike Cernovich pointed to a 2016 award-winning recipe of Waltz's that included paprika, chili powder, and garlic powder. It's like, they know spices. And he said, conservative radio's Larry O'Connor said, it's like a minstrel show lampooning white Midwestern stereotypes. Ben Shiro felt the need to fact-check that Europeans liked spices so much that they literally got involved in several hundred years of war in order to determine control of the spice trade. And Senator Cruz put the capper on it. He said Hispanics are not tacos. Rick. What is happening?
Joy, these people are, their brains are so broken. Their brains are so broken at this point. I mean, they're literally spending millions of hours panicking about Tim Waltz's bland taco recipe. This is a party that is so broken brain, that is so completely off the rails. They're in such a deep panic. By next week, they're going to wonder if he's gotten, if his breakfast cereal is approved by some sort of Midwestern board of blandness. They are in a panic. Joy, I am eating this up with a spoon because these people are absolutely hopeless. They've got nothing. They got nothing.
Nothing. I mean, you got to have something. You can't counter. You have to have some kind of a strategy. Alicia, it is so wild. I cannot believe they are fact checking whether or not Tim Walz, or basically they're like, white people like spices too. Like, that's their answer. That is literally their reaction to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. White people like spices. Like, okay, so that's your answer to this. Okay, ma'am, let me go to these polls. This is why they're panicking. Okay, it's not just the fact that they're mad. His tuna's spicy too. His tuna could be spicy. Why y'all got to do that to him? Like, are you defending him? Are you mad at him? Do you like him? Pennsylvania, Harris up 1. Michigan, Harris up 3. Wisconsin, Harris up 3. Georgia, even. North Carolina, Harris 1. Arizona, Harris 2. Nevada, Trump 3. That's what they're mad about, right?
Oh my goodness, they're mad that they are behind the polls, but they're also behind in being the person that somebody wants to have a beer with, because they're the ones that came up with that analogy, right? It's actually really funny to watch them go hysterical with this analogy. I mean, even Donald Trump decided to bring cereal boxes out this week. So it's just like, it is the wildest.
I haven't seen Cheerios in a while.
It is the wildest attack on grocery store items and everyday items versus actually a policy. And to be honest, I was listening a little bit to Trump this week, that weird press conference or whatever you call it. And I can only imagine that people are kind of just tired of him talking in circles about the economy and grocery store and bacon prices and all of these things that he's just making up on the fly. And then they're going after the nicest guy ever. I mean, like, how can you, like, Republicans liked him in Congress. They're going after him, talking about his food choices versus the fact that they actually have policy positions that majority of Americans, including those who vote Republican, actually support getting prices lower in grocery stores so that people can buy more seasonings. Right, bringing the cost of ownership down.
Lowry's seasoned salt for all.
All of the things, right? They're mad we're having a debate on seasoning.
I I mean, look, and it's like, y'all, it's okay. If you want to put Lowry's on y'all food, you can. Everybody can have Lowry's. That's what the Harris Waltz team is about. They're like, everyone can spice in their food as much as they want or as little as they want. It's okay.
Each of you know what it means to stare down danger and summon the strength in the moment of trial. We're grateful for all that you three have done. So many more.
Of all the privileges of this office, none is greater than serving as the Commander-in-Chief of the finest military that the world has ever known. And of all the military decorations that our nation can bestow, we have none higher than the Medal of Honor.
When you meet a veteran who wears that medal, remember the moment. Because you are looking at one of the bravest ever to wear our country's uniform.
Today we recognize 7 men as being among the bravest of the brave. Each of them distinguished himself with extraordinary valor. In the famous words, at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty.
Hi again, everyone. It's 5 o'clock in the East. The highest military honor one can receive is the Medal of Honor, bestowed by the Commander-in-Chief to individuals who exhibit extraordinary bravery in combat, who in some cases make the ultimate sacrifice. This highest honor for valor has been awarded to just 3,519 recipients out of the more than 41 million individuals who have served our country. Among those remarkable recipients are Desmond Doss, a World War II Army medic who put himself in danger to help wounded soldiers. He rescued 75 men trapped at the top of a cliff. Staff Sergeant Ronald J. Schur II. He saved several soldiers when they went under attack from machine gun and sniper fire in Afghanistan. No one died in the attack because of his valiant efforts. Milton L. Olive III was the first African-American soldier to receive this honor. At the age of 18, he sacrificed his life to save others by falling on a grenade. Mary Edwards Walker was an acting assistant surgeon during the Civil War and the only female recipient of the Medal of Honor. Commander Howard Gilmore was killed in action during World War II when his submarine was under attack. When he realized he could not get back into the vessel in time for it to escape, he yelled, "Take her down," and sacrificed himself. And there's a face familiar to all of you. Retired U.S. Army Colonel Jack Jacobs. During the Vietnam War, with impaired vision from injuries, he pulled 14 men to safety while he was under enemy fire. With all of that fresh in your mind, listen to what Donald Trump, the Republican nominee for president, said out loud with cameras rolling last night at a fundraiser at his golf club. He was speaking about awarding Miriam Adelson, she's the widow of GOP megadonor Sheldon Adelson, with the nation's highest civilian honor.
I have to say, Miriam, I watched Sheldon sitting so proud in the White House when we gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman.
So again, not a gotcha moment, nothing caught on secret hidden camera. Public statements, a disgusting and shameful display from anyone, but especially someone who wants to be our country's commander-in-chief. It's a flagrant display of disrespect to the men and women who put their lives on the line and commit heroic acts on the battlefield to protect all of us and our way of life. Friend of this show and retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath put it this way, quote, "No, the Medal of Honor is not the equivalent of the medal Trump gave to Rush Limbaugh and Jim Jordan. No, they're not rated equal, not even close. Every single member of the military knows the significance of the Medal of Honor. Every single commander-in-chief in the history of America knows the significance of this medal, except Donald Trump." And as galling as his comments are, at this point, they're they're not surprising, given the ex-president's long history of disparaging our veterans, publicly and privately. His chief of staff confirmed that he called those who fought for our country suckers and losers. He questioned why someone would serve in the United States military. And he even criticized former Senator John McCain, a prisoner of war, for being captured. This is who Donald Trump really is. And this is where we start the hour with some of our favorite military experts and friends. Medal of Honor recipient and retired Army Colonel Jack Jacobs is here with us, along with retired four-star general and MSNBC military analyst Barry McCaffrey, plus retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel and founder of Democratic Majority Action PAC, the aforementioned Amy McGrath, and the host of the Independent Americans podcast, founder and CEO of the Independent Veterans of America, and founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, Paul Rieckhoff, is here. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your service. I can't believe we have to have this conversation, Colonel Jack, but here we are. I guess what I want to ask you is, do your peers, do the men and women, do veterans, do the men and women of the military understand that Donald Trump not only doesn't respect them, but really does see them as suckers and losers?
Well, many do, but many don't. Despite the fact that Donald Trump is one of the most inept public speakers I've heard, and I'm an old person, so I've been around a great deal. I've heard a great number of public speakers, and you often don't know what it is he's saying, not convinced that he knows what it is he's saying, very digressive and so on, and drifted off into castigating people who have served and sacrificed and can't tell a difference between the Medal of Freedom and the Medal of Honor. We have to remember that this is the man who, as you said, denigrated people who served and sacrificed so that he could enjoy the freedom that he enjoys now. And if it weren't for these people, he wouldn't be in the position where he could enjoy, and all of us wouldn't be in the position where we could enjoy freedom. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is also the guy who managed to avoid serving because of his really deleterious heel spur on his foot. All that notwithstanding, the problem in this regard is that Donald Trump does not understand some of the things which in history have described how we get to a position where we can have freedom. That is through the service and sacrifice of others. I'm reminded of the observation of Hillel, that first century Hebrew scholar who wrote, "If I am only for myself, what am I?" Well, if you are only for yourself, you're probably Donald Trump. Or the observation, almost as poignantly, of John Stuart Mill, who wrote about war. Trump ought to like him because he was something of an individualist and a libertarian, who wrote that a man for whom nothing is more important than his own safety is a miserable creature who is made free and kept free by better men than he. Nicole?
I love that. Colonel Jack, you might be mad at me for doing this, but I'm going to do two things. I'm going to show our viewers some of the video of when President Nixon awarded you this medal, and I'm going to share a little bit more of the history of your service. Your battalion came under intense heavy machine gun and mortar fire from a Viet Cong battalion. And as we said before, even though you were wounded by mortar fragments, you assumed command of the Allied company, ordered a withdrawal from the exposed position, established a defensive perimeter, and despite your own wounds, profuse bleeding from head wounds, which impaired your vision, with disregard for your own safety, you returned intense fire to evacuate a seriously wounded advisor to the safety of a wooded area where you administered life-saving first aid. You then returned through heavy automatic weapons fire to evacuate the wounded company commander. You made repeated trips across the fire-swept open rice paddies, evacuating wounded and their weapons. Your actions saved the lives of a U.S. advisor and 13 Allied soldiers. We don't read all. Brian Williams probably did, and that's one of the many reasons we miss him. But we don't read all that every time we ask for your advice. But some of what I worry about many things when I worry about Donald Trump, but I worry about the erasure of selflessness. And I worry that what Donald Trump normalizes in his disgust of veterans and of those who lose their lives. I mean, one of the most harrowing things I think I read during his whole presidency was that he stood with General Kelly and didn't understand basically his pride in having a son who sacrificed, who lost his life serving the country. He sees people who put something other than themselves above self-interest as suckers and losers. That's his word. What do we do as a country with the fact that he's been elevated a third time, that an entire political party elevated somebody who sees service that way?
Well, we all have to do a much better job of educating not only this generation, the people who are voting now, but future generations about the importance of democracy and how costly it is to get it and to keep it. Listen, you're looking at somebody who believes in universal service. I think anybody who's lucky enough to live in a free country owes it something in the form of service. And it's only until we have a system in which everybody has to make a contribution to freedom that we will value those things and therefore reject those who think that people who serve and sacrifice are losers. Those of us who've served in combat, General McCaffrey and everybody else who's been in uniform, but particularly those who've served in combat, understand how important it is that we take care of each other. That's how we defeat the enemy and we come home and we preserve freedom. Unless we can educate future generations about the importance of doing that is the route to freedom, we will always be at risk. In this situation, we'll be at risk. We will be at risk from demagogues who try to negate the efforts of those who made this country great and who will keep it great. Education is the only way that we can reach into the future, and we have to do a much better job of educating our future generations, Nicole.
It is official. Vice presidential candidates J.D. Vance and Tim Walz will debate in October. This news comes as more of Vance's past controversial comments are being uncovered. One of the latest. Vance said in a 2021 speech that companies come out in favor of abortion rights because they prefer, quote, cheap labor and don't want their employees to have children. My nightcap is still here. Willie, you thought the weirdest thing you would see was Olympic breakdancing. It wasn't. It's more and more past interviews of J.D. Vance. Do you wonder, was J.D. Vance actually vetted by the Trump campaign, or was it Don Jr. saying, hey, Dad, pick my guy and maybe I can be his VP one day?
Oh, it was for sure Don Jr. saying, this is my guy, trust me, he helps us with our base. And that's the problem. It was a base pick. It was, let's remember when he was chosen what this race looked like. The Trump campaign was confident at that point that they were rolling to victory. They were looking at states that they thought they could win, like Virginia and Minnesota. They were talking about winning New Jersey. It was going to be a runaway. How high could we run up the score in the Electoral College? So let's deepen our base's support. So J.D. Vance is a base pick. He brings out the white men that support Donald Trump and have, although decreasingly so in recent polls since Kamala Harris got in the race. And then everything changed, and suddenly it looked like, oh, wait, we need some of the states that a different choice would have helped us win. So is there some buyer's remorse? Probably. We've heard some reports this week that Donald Trump, as he's wont to do, is blaming a whole bunch of other people, anybody but himself, as his poll numbers have slipped against Kamala Harris, with J.D. Vance perhaps being in his crosshairs. He came out publicly and said, no, he's my guy, he's great, he helps us out. But without question, there is some remorse given all, and now what looks like a bottomless well of comments that have offended just about anybody, including suburban women and childless cat ladies, an important demographic that you're going to need to win this election.
If they wanted to win Virginia, then perhaps they could have gotten Glenn Youngkin to go on the campaign trail with them, but you don't hear from Glenn Youngkin. In fact, it seems like J.D. Vance is all alone out there right now. James, what do you think?
Well, I mean, it's hard to believe that they vetted him, but I have news for President Trump and his entire campaign. When it comes to J.D. Vance, more is on the way. They're just starting to drill down now. And do you think all of the stupid misogynistic things that he said in the past, you think that we know them all yet? Not hardly. That people are unearthing videos, unearthing written things like crazy, and you're just going to have to stand there, dude, and take it, because they're going to beat you over the head with this. And you know, I don't know if they vetted him. They supposedly hacked 270-page 6 document. I have no idea, from the Trump campaign. I don't know what was in there, but this was a Don Jr. Tucker operation that has blown up in everybody's face.
Basil, what is your take? Because we're just a few weeks into J.D. Vance, and I've yet to see him have even a good interview. Last weekend, I heard Laura Ingraham say, J.D. Vance did so well in national media, they'll be clamoring. No one will want to interview him again because he fared so well. I didn't see a single interview where he fared so well. What have you seen, Basil?
I haven't seen that either. And frankly, you know, when you get up at a podium, stand in front of a microphone, and announce to women that they will not have sovereignty over their own body, and that the men that are going to run this country, should Donald Trump be elected, are going to be the ones that make decisions about your reproductive health, among other things, like making sure that there are no longer no-fault divorces. So you have to go back to your husband to get permission to divorce him. When you stand in front of a podium or microphone, and when your surrogates are out there extolling the benefits of Project 2025, should Trump be elected, there's, in a way, there's just sort of no winning from that situation, because they will get hammered, they will get pushback at every single turn. And while James is on with us, I have to say that, you know, Bill Clinton was my first presidential vote in 1992. And I remember that being the year of the woman. And that's important to me because we had, you know, African-American, Latino voters, women voters come out so significantly, because that was, for a young college student like me, that was a really critical election, because I felt connected to it. I felt a part of it. And, you know, I just don't see that if you're a voter out there, that when you look at the Trump-Vance ticket, that you feel, outside of his core base, that you feel that this is something, if you haven't made a decision to join, that you would. Campaigns are additive. You're supposed to be bringing people into the fold, not excluding them. And that seems to be what he does every time he opens his mouth.
Paul, you know I'm going to ask you about this. Tim Walz, he addressed this week the criticism of his military record, and when he did so, he went out of his way to thank J.D. Vance for his military service. What do you make of this whole thing, Vance going after Tim Walz? And I'm not going to weigh in. What do you think?
I think, just to start on Vance, he's not very good at this. Right. And I think that's what we're all finding out. I mean, he's making DeSantis look good. And you've got Trump, who's not as good at this as he used to be. And Kamala Harris seems to be better at this than many people expected, maybe. And Walz is doing pretty well out of the gate, too. So you've got this interesting clash now that is still always, in my view, going to be about a fight in the middle. And obviously turnout is going to be a key now with Kamala Harris. But these people, these couple million people in key swing states who are independent like me, who are unaffiliated, a lot of them are veterans, a lot of them are young people, and they're evaluating these candidates and looking to see who they trust and who they feel good with, and who sets a good pace and a good tone. And I think this fight between Vance and Walz is something all veterans have been kind of fearing for a long time, because now it's the full weaponization of our services. And it's now up to them to determine how veterans will fight in politics. And Vance fired the first shot. It's a dirty shot. It's the swift boat shot that Republicans always do. And you should have seen it coming. If you didn't, then doom on you. And Tim Walz, who's been honorable, I've known for a long time, I've written a piece about him, had a choice to make. He can go down and hit hard below the belt too, or he could go high. So he defended himself, and then he went high and he tried to reset the tone. Now, we'll see if that works. I hope it works, because it's better for America, it's better for veterans, but we'll see over time if it works. And in the last couple of days, it seems like it is. And I think that's also cuts to the core of what veterans are looking for, but what America is looking for. We want people who can set a command climate and a tone that our country can be proud of. Because when you think about Trump, I just want to say, like, aren't you all sick of this? Aren't you ashamed? I mean, enough already for our country looking like this in the global stage. And Vance is just doubling down on all that.
Willie, how much of a secret weapon is Tim Walz in terms of combating the narrative that Democrats have become super woke and that this is all about culture wars? I mean, this is a guy from Minnesota, a veteran, a teacher, a coach who's got, you know, a little bit of dad and a little bit of Chris Farley energy in the best Chris Farley way possible.
That's a high compliment, as you point out. Chris Farley
sure
energy,
is.
a high compliment. Yeah, I mean, I think to some people it was confounding at first, and everyone said, "Wait, what about Josh Shapiro? You have to win Pennsylvania. How could it not be this popular governor of this make-or-break state?" And then as this week and a half or 2 weeks almost now has gone along, I think some people have understood why the Harris campaign picked him. Given his performance on stage, given his credentials, as you say, I mean, down to, you know, the camouflage hat that he pulls off credibly, it gives them an angle and it gives them a wedge back against the Trump campaign, which believed it had sort of owned that. But to hear the criticism of Tim Walz's service right now on a day when Donald Trump was talking about how the Congressional Medal of Honor maybe isn't as great as the Presidential Medal of Freedom, because when those heroic members of our armed services and veterans come in, he says they're, quote, in bad shape. But when you give the Presidential Medal of Freedom, like he talked about Sheldon Adelson's wife, she's beautiful and she looks great, and maybe that's even a little bit better. So I think Democrats can credibly say, you want to criticize military service when again and again and again Donald Trump has shown he has no understanding of what it means to sacrifice and do what Paul Rieckhoff has done for the country. Please spare us your criticism.
Senator Josh Hawley is up for re-election to a second term, and the Missouri Republicans should be cruising to victory. It's a pretty conservative state at this point. He's up against a guy with a great bio. Democratic nominee Lucas Kunce is a lawyer, 13-year Marine Corps veteran who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He just released this ad narrated by actor John Goodman, a Missouri native.
Family values. I learned what that meant while growing up in the most beautiful state in the Union. And what that didn't mean. Family values didn't mean cruelty. It didn't mean fake patriotism. It didn't mean telling people how to live or family profits. It didn't mean leaving folks behind or making life harder for hardworking people. And it sure as hell didn't mean robbing people. None of that is family values. That's something else.
It's a good ad. Caught my attention when I saw it. But the most recent poll back in June, again, showed Hawley up by 9 points. He should be cruising to victory. But I got to say, maybe his internal polling is telling him something different, because he is acting like a guy who is in a neck-and-neck race and, frankly, desperate. This was Hawley pulling the kind of thirsty stunt at the Missouri State Fair yesterday that the candidate getting crushed usually tries to kind of get some attention, get back in the race. He had a camera follow him as he kind of hunted down Kunce and then demanded Kunce debate him right then and there, even though Kunce has agreed to 5 debates already.
Let's go find Lucas Kunce. Let's go find him.
How you doing, man?
We got a debate today?
I don't know what you're talking
about. We got a debate? Let's do it. Are you ready? We've got it right across the place. Yeah. We're ready to go. Or is this a no? Come on, man.
Josh, man, we got 5 televised debates we agreed to.
Hey, we've got one right here. Let's debate. Let's debate. Unbelievable. So this is a no for today, huh?
You're kind of cartoony, man.
I tell you what,
it's a little weird.
Joining me now is the man on the left of your screen, Lucas Kunce, who is the Democratic candidate for Senate in Missouri. I have to say, I saw the headline and I saw the picture, and I will be honest, I thought you had gone to do that to Josh Hawley, because in my head I was thinking, well, you know, he's the incumbent and he's probably favored in this race, and so you're trying to. I was pretty shocked it was the other way around. Do you understand what's happening here?
You know exactly what's happening. I mean, the man is scared because he knows that Missourians hate him. He knows that we don't want the things that he wants, which is to take away no-fault divorce, contraception, in vitro fertilization, no abortion access for rape and incest. It's just, I'm sorry, dude, but that's not what everyday people want. And, you know, the craziest thing about this is that last year at the exact same event at the state fair, I went up to say hi to him, and he pulled your typical Josh Hawley, right? His classic move, which was skittering away as fast as he could. I guess in the interim, he must have boned up on a few chapters of his manhood book because, yeah, he came to play this year all mic'd up, camera crew behind him, and just, yapping up in my face for, I don't know, probably 5 minutes.
You just mentioned IVF contraception and abortion, and I should note that you are one of the several states that are going to have a ballot initiative on abortion. The initiative has not been certified, but it looks like it's going to clear. And right now, the polling on that shows 44% support of restoring abortion rights in your state, 37% oppose. Hawley on this seems pretty clear. How much do you think this will be a factor in the race?
Oh, this is everything. It's not just this, but this is going to be huge for us. People are excited to take their rights back from controlling politicians like him. I mean, he wants to control us in the bedroom, in the doctor's office, in the workplace. Like, the last thing that Missourians want is to be controlled. They want a senator who will bring money home and protect their rights so that we can just make our own decisions rather than being told how to live. This guy brings no money back, and he wants to take away all our rights, which, again, it's why he's scared. It's why he's doing these stunts. And it's why he's spent $1 million in lying attack ads against me already. Like, came out of the gate, didn't say a thing about himself, $1 million of just like complete lie attack ads, because he is absolutely scared. And, if anyone wants to help us fight back against that, lucaskunz.com is definitely the place to go.
You spent 13 years in the Marine Corps, if I'm not mistaken, served in wars abroad. I'm curious, because we were talking about it earlier, about the ex-president Donald Trump's comments yesterday about the medal that he gave Miriam Adelson being superior to the Medal of Honor because she didn't have to get shot and she was looking beautiful, but she still got the medal.
I mean, it's I miss those comments, but it's the exact opposite of the way I feel about members of the service. My family, we grew up, my parents got married at 19 and 22 years old, right? They had 4 kids. My littlest sister had heart surgeries. We went bankrupt from that. And the people in our neighborhood who took care of us, passed the plate at church for us, brought food by the house, a lot of them were Vietnam veterans, Marines. They took me down to the Marine Corps League. And I saw these guys who really didn't get any medals, right? Who were drafted, who went to serve their country and come home, just meet the worst conditions upon returning home. Many suffering through PTSD, lost their friends over there. And, no matter what, those were the guys who took care of our community, took care of all of us. They were my heroes growing up. Like, these are the heroes of our communities because they served selflessly without any thought of glory. And I've always wanted to be like them. So whatever other people say about our veterans, I always wanted to be like them. That's why I joined the Marine Corps. I led a police training team in Iraq. My responsibility was to bring home 12 Marines and a Navy corpsman alive after we ran our missions in the Sunni Triangle. Thank God that happened. Went to Afghanistan twice. Every veteran that I served with served honorably, and I'm so proud of all of them. And one of the other reasons we're going to win this race is that Missouri doesn't have a single veteran in its congressional delegation. No member of Congress is a veteran from Missouri. And it shows, man. It really shows. I use the VA for healthcare. No one understands what that's like. And Josh Hawley, he's got so many flaws, but it really just grinds me up that he stalled the PACT Act, which was for all of us who were exposed to burn pits. It's like, don't play politics with veterans. Just take care of us.
Lucas Kunz is the Democratic nominee for Senate in the state of Missouri. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is power. Those are the pillars of society as described in George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984. But that reality does not just exist in the novel. The Russian politician Vladimir Kara-Murza has been fighting against that reality, which he says does exist under the regime of Vladimir Putin today. Kara-Murza began speaking out against the Russian government at the age of 16. He entered Russian politics in the late 1990s as Vladimir Putin was rising in the ranks of the Kremlin. Kara-Murza's vocal and longtime opposition to Putin's regime put his life in danger countless times. In 2015 and 2017, Kara-Murza was poisoned, although no evidence could be linked directly back to the Kremlin. Kara-Murza's opposition to Putin reached a new level of importance 904 days ago when Russia began its war on Ukraine. Kara-Murza publicly condemned Putin for his invasion of Ukraine, saying Putin condemns, quote, a regime of murderers. Kara-Murza refused to be silent, leading family and friends to fear for his safety and his imprisonment if he went back to Russia. One of those friends was Bill Browder, a businessman with deep and personal knowledge of Vladimir Putin's wrath. In 2007, Browder helped expose a massive corruption by Russian government officials with his friend and attorney, Sergei Magnitsky. He's a whistleblower whose torture and death inside a Russian prison sparked global outcry and worldwide legislation against Putin's human rights abuses. Browder knew what horrors could await Vladimir Kara-Murza if he was put in a Russian prison. In April of 2022, Bill had dinner with Vladimir and his wife in London. He pleaded for Vladimir not to return to Moscow. Quote, "Vladimir, there's no way you can go back to Moscow. They've tried to kill you twice. They'll try again. At best, they'll arrest you. And if they do, we have no leverage to get you out. Putin has gone so far off the rails that he doesn't care what anyone thinks," end quote. A weary expression passed over Vladimir's face. I'm sure every friend had said the same thing after learning about his plans to go back to Russia. "Bill," he said, "I'm a Russian politician. All Russians should stand up to Putin. But how can I ask others to do that if I'm too afraid to return to my own country? I must be there." I spoke with Vladimir Kara-Murza on April 10th, 2022, just days after Bill's efforts to stop him from returning to Moscow. Here's a little bit of our fateful conversation. Are you worried about speaking out against the Russian government and against this war and invasion from Russia?
We all know the price. We all know the cost. But we also know that there are millions of people in Russia who categorically oppose Putin regime and everything it's doing, both in terms of domestic repression and in terms of external aggression.
The very next day, Vladimir Kara-Murza was arrested outside his house in Russia, convicted ultimately of treason, and sentenced to 25 years in a Siberian prison for his opposition to the war. Given only 1.5 hours a day to write in his cell, Kara-Murza risked further retaliation by writing passionate columns that were published in the Washington Post. And those columns earned Kara-Murza a Pulitzer Prize while he was still incarcerated. Even when petitioning for his freedom before Russia's Supreme Court, Kara-Murza would not relent. He wrote, quote, "For a third year now, my country, or more precisely, an aging, irremovable, illegitimate dictator who has arrogated to himself the right to speak and act on behalf of my country, has been waging a brutal, unjust, invasive war against a neighboring independent state. In the course of this aggression, the invader has committed genuine war crimes," end quote. Kara-Murza remained imprisoned in Russia until 2 weeks ago, when he became one of the 24 prisoners released in the historic prisoner exchange arranged by the Biden White House. Kara-Murza and his family met with President Biden at the White House last night. Joining us now, free from his cell in a Siberian prison, is the Russian opposition leader and Pulitzer Prize winner Vladimir Kara-Murza. Also with us is his friend and mine, the advocate Bill Browder, CEO of Hermitage Capital Management and head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. Volodya, I want to just reach through the camera and give you a hug, first of all. I truly, and Bill knows this, and your wife knows this, I didn't think we would have this conversation ever. So welcome back.
Well, neither did I, Ali. I wasn't, up until 3 weeks ago, I was certain that I was going to die in a Siberian prison, and everything still feels like a miracle. You know, frankly, felt as if I've been watching some sort of a movie. It's a very good one, but it still feels very surreal. And I just want to thank you for having me back on the show. It's really good to be back on your program. That interview that you just aired, the clip you just aired from, was my last television interview before my arrest. So it has special meaning to be back here on MSNBC. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who, over these past 2.5 years, continued their efforts, continued to speak out, continued to campaign, continued to remind people of the plight of those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of political prisoners and prisoners of conscience who are languishing in Putin's modern-day gulag for the only quote-unquote crime of opposing Putin's dictatorship and for opposing his criminal aggressive war against Ukraine. And let's not forget that while 16 of us have been snatched from that hell, there are so many others who are still there. And this historic exchange that happened 2 weeks ago showed, I think, very clearly that at the end of the day, public opinion in the free world is stronger than any dictator and any dictator's propaganda machine. And I was very grateful to have the opportunity yesterday to personally thank the President of the United States and the role he played in that exchange, in saving the lives of 16 people, of 16 human beings, of 16 human souls. To me, the difference between a democracy and a dictatorship is that there can be no higher value for a democracy than human life. And 16 human lives were saved in that exchange on the 1st of August at Ankara Airport. And I think despite the stereotypes, despite the usual drumbeat of the cynics and the skeptics, that decision, that exchange showed that there is thankfully still room for principle and values in political decision-making.
If there was a drumbeat, some of the key drummers were your wife, who appeared on my show 1 year after your arrest to talk about what was going on, and of course, our friend Bill. I know you two got a chance to reunite the other night. Bill tweeted out that you had a huge feast to put some calories into you because you've lost a lot of weight in prison. But Bill, you saw Volodya the other day, and we talked about this a lot, and you kept that pressure up. And I think that's important. It's instructive about what happens next and what's going to happen. And when you and I talked tonight that Vladimir was released, you said he's going to come back and we're going to continue the fight.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And as Vladimir just said, there's 1,000 plus other people in Putin's gulag, and a lot of people who are potentially going to die if we don't get them out. And on top of that, of course, is Putin's murderous war against Ukraine. And we have to do everything possible to help the Ukrainians fight back against Putin. And so we're taking a moment right now to celebrate this absolute miracle of Vladimir being alive and free. And we're going to enjoy this moment, but we have a lot more work to do. And when Vladimir and I sat down last Sunday for dinner, that's what we talked about, is what we're going to do next and how we're going to do it next, because, Putin's not going away. And until we get rid of Putin, there's going to be a lot of suffering and a lot of terrible stuff happening in the world.
Vladimir, if someone didn't know you'd been in jail for the last 2.5 years in prison, they might not know. You look a little slimmer than you did back then, and I know you've got some health issues that didn't make doing hard time good for you. But tell me what that was like. You were in isolation the entire time.
Yes, I spent, out of the 2.5 years in prison, I spent almost 11 months straight in solitary confinement, where essentially you just sit in a small cell, in a small cupboard, 2 by 3 meters, so about 7 by 10 feet. Nothing in the cell. You don't have anything on you. There's just one small window near the ceiling. Your bunk gets attached to the wall at 5 o'clock in the morning and until 9 p.m. when it's light out. You don't have anyone to speak to. You don't have anything to do. You have nowhere to go. All you can do is effectively just, walk around the cell as much as you can in that confined space and stare at a wall. You're only given pen and paper to write for 90 minutes a day. For another 90 minutes, you're taken out for a so-called walk, which is essentially just walking around in a small internal roof-covered prison courtyard, not much larger than the cell. And on top of, constantly being in this confined space, on top of complete isolation from any human contact. And by the way, there's a reason why, according to international law, according to the United Nations minimal standard rules on the treatment of prisoners, solitary confinement that is more than 15 days long is officially considered to be a form of torture, degrading, or inhumane treatment, because as Aristotle said, human beings are social animals. We need interaction. We need human contact just as much as we need food to eat or water to drink or oxygen to breathe. And when you're completely deprived of that, well, frankly, that's extremely difficult mentally and psychologically. So it's a psychological form of torture. And on top of all of that, I was forbidden from calling my family in the 2.5 years I've been to prison. I only once was able to telephone my wife, and twice my 3 children. I was forbidden from going to church. And, it was funny to me. Well, funny perhaps is the wrong word in this situation, but amusing at least, that, so many people around the world take this sort of Kremlin propaganda line that somehow Vladimir Putin is a defender of traditional family values, traditional Christian values. That's how he likes to portray himself. And, whenever anybody in the West repeats that propaganda line, I hope they remember the fact that, political opponents of Putin, political prisoners of Putin who are confined to the prisons and penal camps, are not allowed to call their wives or their children, are not allowed to go to church. Alexei Navalny was in exactly the same situation as I was. So much for traditional family values. Hypocrisy is a real cornerstone of the Putin regime in everything they do.